In this video, I'm going to take you through my full tutor analysis from start to finish, everything you need to know ahead of your ACCA SBL examination for the December 2025 sitting for the pre-seen information of Levwell Plc. If you'd like access to a copy of my exclusive SBL notes you can see above me that helps students around the world to pass their examination, be sure to click the link in the description of this video and you can download a copy yourself. I'm also delighted to say I'm affiliated and associated with Astranti. They offer mock examinations based on the pre-seen information for Levwell Plc along with their pre-seen analysis packs. Click the links in the description of this video to check them out. And for pure transparency, as always, if you were to purchase anything, I'd be entitled to a small percentage which goes to supporting the channel. But as always, get yourself settled. I'm going to take you through everything you need to know. There are a lot of notes, but this could be the difference in getting you the pass. So let's make a start on page number 1 on the contents page. But now let's make a start on the contents page. What would I go about if I was in your situation? Well, first of all, it has to be about separating out your own notes section by section, whether that be the industry challenges, the board structure. It's so that on the exam day, you have that picture in your mind that no matter what they throw at you in the requirements, you've got something to talk about and you've put it into your own words along with using my notes you can see on the screen. The other factors I've got down below on here are the actual corporate governance key areas, professional skills marks, the 3 E's model, lots of different things on there you can read in your own time and you'll see on the other videos on my channel. Some are more likely than others, but you've got to be able to apply these business models and theories to the scenario, to the unseen information that comes up on the exam day. And that is what is going to get you the high marks on there. So I'm going to get stuck into the nitty-gritty, the information that we're given in the pre-seen that could help you. And even if you've got the exam tomorrow, this could make the difference. Well, Levwell or Levwell Plc, depends which one you want to refer to. Either will be fine on the exam day. Key thing here, owns and operates 35 high-quality 4-star hotels in Estland. They only operate in Estland and they only have 35 on there. The 4-star is really key because you could talk about if they want to get promoted or they may get demoted on there. And the key bit here is their target market is primarily leisure guests, not business guests. We're then told about the sort of things, as you would imagine, from an SBL examination pre-seen, the hotel industry itself, sort of setting the scene on there about the different people who stay there, short-term accommodation, the different facilities and the various income streams and attractions that you would expect at a 4-star hotel on that. Now for your notes, you need to get down those different areas about treatment, swimming pools, bars. Those are the specifics that you need to apply on the exam day in your analysis. There are 2 types of guests, business and leisure, but they have different requirements. And that is where there could be a sort of strategy case on the exam day. Who knows? I don't have a crystal ball, but these would be the things about managing guests' expectations. What does actually Levwell have in terms of the hotels that they operate in? We're given more information later on. But the leisure guests are more there for sort of personal reasons, as you would imagine, whereas business guests want good Wi-Fi and they are there for work purposes. It's, yeah, as you would imagine. The key phrase here is that leisure guests tend to be more price sensitive than business guests and typically stay for longer. So that is who Levwell actually target, and a massive key phrase that you need to be aware of, and I would definitely apply on the exam day. As you would imagine, they've given us a rating system of 1 to 5 stars. They've put this on there basically so that a student maybe doesn't get that number 1 isn't mixed up as being like a really good thing. But we're also told that in terms of Estland, they actually have these ratings that are done by inspectors. The National Tourist Board of Visit Estland were given more information on page 7, but it's based on the 3 variables of room quality, service quality, and the range of facilities. So when you're talking about the hotels themselves, think about those 3 areas and get them down in your analysis. That's where I've also got, as you can see on here, Porter's Diamond, Porter's 5 Forces, some more theories for you to consider. and to go into a bit more detail, that when you do some of the Astranti mock papers, they've actually included some of these business models within those mock papers as to what their professional markers actually think are going to come up. So if you'll get on to pages 3 and 4 now, starting on the left-hand side, and as you would imagine, they've given us a breakdown of what a 4-star hotel actually is, where Levwell Plc actually fits in, the key facilities and services the customers or guests would actually be expecting, and what a 4-star status kind of hotel needs to provide. Looking at the variables on there, you've got to think to yourself, well, what does Levwell actually have to do to actually get themselves up to the 5-star? And that's that world-class luxury personalised service. But you've got to have in the back of your mind, what if they were to get demoted down to 3 stars? Could be a possibility, but just to be aware of. So setting a 4-star hotel out for Levwell Plc, I'd say that's reasonably premium prices, something to be aware of maybe when you're talking about it. It's not going to be cheap as chips on there, put it that way. Now, coming on to the hotel industry structure itself, this is critical that a student who's doing this SBL exam gets their head around which one does Levwell Plc fall under. And they are a chain on there. They are not part of an independent. They could buy up independent hotels, single-owned hotels, to put into their portfolio, but they are a hotel chain. We'll see later on that they are of a bespoke standard, that each hotel is individual to itself, and that's where you've got the other variables about quality standards on there. We've got Levwell has one website on page 10. Every Levwell hotel is actually different. If you look at page 8, Levwell doesn't usually acquire hotels as well. That's another thing just to wrap your head around. They try to do it more organically on there, maybe actually build the hotels themselves. We've also got a key stat on there that we've got independent hotels are a significant part of the market in Estland, accounting for 48% of the supply of guest rooms in 2004. So that is what we're looking at in terms of competition, that the independent hotels take up 48% of the market. And we'll come on to page 4 in a moment on the right-hand side, but you've got some of the main key competitors on there of Beston, Travelwise, Vacons, Yelton and Haliot. They are the big competitors on there that we need to be aware of. Hotel chains, lastly on page 3, in Estland have also increased their numbers of hotels through organic growth, so opening up their own new hotels or partnering arrangements on there. So Levwell doesn't have a franchise, which we're going to come on to in a moment. Levwell actually opens up new hotels themselves. That is the way that they operate, and you've got to make sure that you understand the ins and outs of their business model. And speaking of business model, you can see it on the right-hand side now. We have two main operating models, owner-managed and franchised on there. If you have a flick down to page 8, Levwell Plc confirmed as using the owner-managed model on there. So for your notes, they are, in terms of the industry structure, a chain, and the business model, owner-managed on there. Now this is where you can see in my notes about the strategies and performance being long-term and short-term factors on there. This is where you've got to be aware and be able to picture how the structure actually works. And then in terms of a sort of SWOT analysis, potentially for growth, make sure you understand the actual franchise model. I know lots of students might get a bit confused by what a franchisee or the franchisor actually is, who makes the payments to who. It could be linked into a sort of business model where they might be tempted to switch to a different business model. Again, you've just got to have that in the back of your mind come the exam day. And then we're told as well from the franchise perspective about the logistics of third-party real estate companies, standards on there, day-to-day operations, lots of things that you need to be aware of, because out of the top 5 companies, so the 5 largest hotel chains in Estland account for 23.1% of the total supply of the hotel rooms. If you look on the diagram on the right-hand side, 3 of them are franchised, 2 of them are owner-managed. And for a bit of perspective on here as well, they're all based in Estland, just like we have for Levwell. Levwell does not operate internationally. We're not given much about any of the other firms operating internationally on there, but we were told that the 5 largest hotel chains in Estland account for 23.1% for the actual market itself. This is where you've got to be really, really careful about understanding the perspective of what is going on in the marketplace. So if we focus in on the table now a bit more specifically, and we're not told obviously about Levwell being on there, but I've put on my notes just under where the number of hotels in Estland for Beston, Travelwise, Vacant, Yelton, we've got 504, 288, 174. I'll even put my mouse on it for you. Levwell, for perspective, only have 35. They're very niche, very bespoke in terms of what they actually offer. I've totaled up the 23.1 you'll see in the percentage of total hotels in Estland, just for your peace of mind to reconcile it on there for all the accountants out there. Now we have to look at the other one, the average number of rooms per hotel. This is the other staggering thing. Remember from the page up above on page 2, we're told that Levwell only has 80 rooms per hotel, and you can also see that on page 8. Look at the competitors, Beston Travelwise, 150, 140, 145. The size and scale and the difference in the larger companies on there. The only thing for your notes is that we're not told the percentage of the market share or the percentage of the total number of rooms in Estland, or the total number of market share really that we actually have for Levwell in Estland. That would be something that maybe they could throw up on the exam day. Again, tricky one. Hard to tell where we're at the moment. We're now getting on to the next sort of other areas of the nitty-gritties of diving into more specific areas about, maybe we've got on here, as you can see, the revenue streams. So the majority of actual revenue from accommodation, food and drink and sales are important to additional revenue streams. I think some students who aren't prepared, or they might panic on the exam day, might go, right, it's a hotel chain, I've read it through once, I kind of get what you mean, and they'll write in their answers, yep, they make all their money through, actually, as you would imagine, a hotel sells rooms on there. But you can see on here, 60 to 70% of their total revenue from accommodation is linked to the rooms. You have the other 25 to 35% on there, which links into other revenue, but that is from the food and drink. That's why it's really important that you talk about those other areas in the actual hotel, the bars, the restaurants on there, that they can bring in other customers. We were also talking about other services, so weddings, business conferences, spas, beauty treatments. They usually account for 5 to 10%. When it comes to Levwell Plc on there, we'll see later on that's at only about 5%, so another revenue opportunity on there. But the other key thing, this is a major key thing for you to get down. I'm going to even put my mouse on it, and I've got in my notes, key phrase to note down. The restaurants and bars in many hotels are open to non-residents, so people who are not staying there, people who are able to actually go into the hotels to buy food and drink in their actual restaurant and bar. Okay, now the key thing for your notes is on page 9, Levwell Plc do not allow non-residents, people from the general public, to actually just walk into the hotel and say, yep, I fancy dinner here tonight, I'm going to pay on that. That is a real key thing in terms of maybe expanding their revenue streams, and could be applied in anything from sort of a SWOT analysis on there. Definitely get that down in your notes. It is a massive key factor. The other one, you can see where my mouse is, I really want to hit home as being a real important point. The operating profit margin for hotels in Estland is typically around 10%. Now, if you've got my notes, scroll down to page 13, because the operating profit margin, when I first looked at it, it was floating around about 13, 14%. And you kind of go, well, revenue's going up, and surely the operating profit margin should be higher than that. Well, in actual fact, when you take a step back and you look at what we're getting here in terms of Levwell Plc holistically as an overview, they're doing really well in terms of compared to their competitors in the market. Their operating profit margins are a lot higher. Their actual occupancy rates are a lot higher. They're going for a real niche effect in terms of the number of hotels and the number of rooms, that everything is bespoke, it's individual, and so when the leisure guests come and spend time there, even though there are seasonality factors, which we'll come on to later on, they really enjoy what they are actually purchasing. It's very individualistic to it. And as you can see there, the key bit from an economic point, from a pestle analysis point of view, it's monopolistic competition that we currently have in Estland, where we've got many firms, differentiated products, but limited market power. Competitors can't really do much. It's a case of, if you're going to stay there, maybe price is a key thing, which we've talked about. But from that is where I think on here, Levwell Plc are quite fitting into that niche market, that people are willing to pay that extra bit. They've got the high standards of being 4-star, and that is where I think they've really got a good standing as to a really good fit about what a guest can expect if they were to stay there, and they're willing to actually pay the money on it. Well, now let's move on to the industry challenges, as you can see on the left-hand side. And this is where we've got a lot to get through in terms of the variety of different areas and the specifics that you need to be aware of and to apply on the exam day. We have intense competition, economic downturn, rising costs just to get us started. As you can see on here, Levwell does this very well about differentiating themselves to attract and retain customers. That, or guests, shall I say, on there. They're individual and unique. So that is a good unique selling point, a good strength from a SWOT analysis perspective. The economic downturn points on here, you should link that into a pestle analysis, all about Estland on there, that leisure guests are more price sensitive. We've already seen that before, and that can link into reduced demand on there. Rising costs that are going to be passed on to the guests, and also has an impact on cash flow because of those increased costs. And you've been given areas such as energy costs, renovation, that you should also be referring to. Staffing wise, another major problem if you go down to page 13, staff turnover is up to 39% on there, and on page 12 it's one of the key values for Levwell that this really shouldn't be happening as well. So again, there's a lot of contradictions on there, things for you to discuss, and can overlap with a variety of different theories in the SBL syllabus. Now, in terms of seasonality, you can see again on the left-hand side, we've got Levwell seasonal figures. You can actually access those on page 9. The interesting thing on there, where it talks about peak seasons and demand is high, variable costs, it's just being aware that it's not completely linear as to what is going on in the marketplace, and just understanding the hotel sector itself. That could link into a professional skills mark area for commercial acumen. Revenue management and pricing is another key area about maximising it on there, linking it to occupancy, and I've got on page 6 the yield management software, another key thing for you to refer to. And the leisure guests, as we touched on before, are more price sensitive, so you've got to be super careful in terms of that revenue management. Threats of new business models as well, like Airbnb, so SWOT analysis really comes into it on there. Basically, alternative accommodation options we need to be aware of and to apply on the exam day. Sustainability wise, there are concerns about the environment, but the key bit for your notes here is that in terms of the environment and carbon emissions, and linking into if a pestle analysis environmental point was to be mentioned, it's really one of very few areas that it actually comes up, and that's quite a surprise because they like to throw it in the SBL exam. So it's good points mentioning it, that it could impact on the demand for certain hotels if they are not environmentally friendly. But have a look through the pre-C notes on the KPIs and also on the board of directors, that we don't have anyone actually accountable or a KPI identified for the environment on there. We're then told areas such as innovation and business development. Lots of key things about when the customers check in and check out, the guests, what do they desire, speed, convenience on there. They've also linked it into an app, so you could refer to that in terms of a pestle analysis point of view. And we're not told if Levwell Plc has this app. So if that was to sort of come up in terms of a technology point, make sure you get that down as well. There is also a unique selling point for competitors on there, that the services and everything from the temperature and the lighting, if they were to use these apps, lots of guests would go, yeah, this is quite nice, quite cool on here. You know, this technology is a real unique selling point that is going to enhance the experience at the hotel. But you've got to think on the other side and go, well, what if the app actually crashed? The capital versus revenue expenditure on there. Have they got the resources to make the investments? This is where, coming on to page 5 on the right hand side now, you've got to be thinking about the chief operations officer that is accountable for these areas, potentially also the IT manager mentioned on page 11. Page 12 highlights the risk areas in terms of data and security, because if you're connecting to all these sites, then you've got data security, cyber security they've referred to on there, the personal data. What if this was to be actually released into the wrong hands? And that's why they've put liable to substantial fines, so a legal point there from a pestle analysis point of view. We're not told if Levwell actually uses this yield management software, so make that statement if you're going to refer to it. But it looks at the efficiencies using the algorithms and AI technology to basically say, well, based on the historical information, it all sounds positive here, and looking at competitors' prices, the market conditions, optimizing revenue versus occupancy, and that is a real SWOT analysis opportunity there, basically getting more money for what we've already got, because there is room at the hotels for greater occupancy. You'll see on page 13. We're also told about a sale and leaseback option on here. This will improve the cash flow industry issues on there, and you've got to be aware of the details as to who owns the ownership of the hotel, the logistics of it. You need to understand and consider all the elements and the impact of the financial statements and business strategy, well, with the flexibility of if they were to actually lease it for a period, repurchase it, actually say we don't want the building anymore. It's a short-term cash flow fix, but something you've definitely got to wrap your head around. I think if they were to test that, that would really put a lot of students off. It would waste a lot of time because they'd probably have to go back and read that part of the pre-C materials. So do not underestimate it. Very technical stuff on there. The industry success factors, note down there the 4 points I've highlighted: the behaviours, expectations, competitive pressures, and developing technologies. Those are the detailed factors that influence success, and you have to be aware of those, and the staff are the key stakeholders who are going to implement that. So very important phrase, that the most important underlying factor which contributes to a hotel success is the guest experience. So in other words, on the exam day, if anything comes up that impacts on the guest experience, which it will do, refer back to that in terms of being an industry success factor, and the market is going to love you for it. There are also a number of supporting factors, like we've touched on before: the facilities, quality, security. Consider all these factors collectively, but relay it back to that guest overall experience as to, are they going to book, are they going to rebook again, and would they maybe recommend it to their friends and family? More generally, they've also talked about the branding, effective marketing, communication on there. To be honest with you, we're not really given much about marketing and the details provided. We're told about leisure guests being more price sensitive. The only thing that links into that is the Visit Estland actual body that attracts guests on there, and therefore I've also linked it down to some SWOT analysis points at the bottom that you can get stuck into, and you can see on there about when they're established, hotels closing down, opportunities of expansion, and threats of losing staff. Now, coming on to the next page, we have the key performance indicators on there: occupancy rates, average daily rates, revenue per available room, average length of stay, guest satisfaction, and employee turnover. Now, for my notes, you'll see the little question marks. That means that on page 13, we're not actually given a graph for those two areas. So that's for the average daily rate and for the average length of stay. Could be an element they could put at you on the exam day just to be aware of, but it's all about measuring and monitoring performance. Those key two words up at the top. And also, we're not given a KPI for any ESG factors, so the environment, social, or governance factors on there. Make sure you're aware of some of the key phrases. In the occupancy rate, The average annual occupancy rate is about 70%, and it's considered good for hotels in Estland. Now, if you look down on page 13, you originally look at it and go, Levwell's getting 77%. Oh, they've got 23%, occupancy completely free. They're well above the industry average, doing really, really well. And then the higher the better in terms of the revenue available per room. So key thing to get down there. Guest satisfaction is looking good, but the employee turnover is the real risky one. And the employees are so critical to any business. That's why we want it to be as low as possible. But unfortunately, it's at 39%. Now, in terms of the industry body, you can see on the left-hand side, there is no specific industry body for the hotel sector in Estland. However, there is that Visit Estland acts again as the industry body for the tourism industry as a whole. I think you'll be able to apply that Visit Estland on the exam day. Make sure you get it down and what they do about marketing internationally, quality control, reliable indicator, and what a customer or a guest would actually expect in terms of facilities and services. It could link into actually what if Levwell was to be reduced from a 4-star to a 3. I've also put on there some other models. So you've got Johnson, Scholes and Whittington, Assos Matrix, 6 capitals on there. Plenty for you to get your teeth stuck into, and the ones that I think are going to be more likely to be tested versus others. But if you downloaded the notes, feel free to check those out and apply it in your actual analysis and revision. Lastly, we're going to come on to, for this section, we've got Levwell, the overview. Now, do not overestimate the importance of part 3 on here for the company background. Founded 40 years ago, high quality hotel experience, guests and employees are felt respected and appreciated. Not sure about that with the staff turnover being so high, but it's an established organisation of hotel chains, bespoke experience, high standards. No non-guests are actually allowed into the hotels for using the bar and the restaurants. And we've got a keynote here that the majority of guests are leisure guests who stay at Levwell. Levwell is also a listed organisation on there. Really key point to get your head around that 80% of the shares are held by institutional investors. So a publicly owned company, shares are easily tradable for it. And Levwell uses an owner-managed business model. International opportunities possible as they only operate in Estland on there. So a structural change opportunity, maybe from a SWOT analysis, could be applied. But again, it's just understanding the details on here is going to be critical for your exam success. The next bit is linking into the company growth. So to date, Levwell has grown organically, not taking on debt and opening new hotels itself. Rather than acquiring hotel businesses, it continually looks for opportunities to increase the number of hotels. So looking at bespoke areas that you kind of think the type of guests that they attract, they would like to stay there themselves. We're not provided in terms of with the name of the business development manager. Definitely worth putting it down about in terms of identifying and evaluating the potential sites, the different guest demands, factors on there, the local area. And in terms of competition, really key for you to get your head around, and I could have touched on this a bit more earlier, that the hotels that Levwell actually own and operate are rural or coastal rather than actually being in a sort of city centre. So again, maybe they could change the strategy on there, but as we've seen before, they're doing pretty well with the limited amount of hotels, only 35 of them, and they've only got 80 guest rooms per hotel. But in terms of occupancy rate, they're higher than the average. They're getting good average daily rates on there. Their margins are higher than the industry as well from the operating profit margin. So a lot of good positive strengths from a SWOT analysis perspective. Despite Levwell's overall aim to continue growing, it closed down 2 hotels 7 years ago because they were performing poorly and were no longer considered profitable. So again, when you read it through, first of all, you kind of go, is that a SWOT analysis weakness? I'm sure I could move it around from there. But when you read through the whole pre-C notes, you kind of go, that was a really good decision from the board structure. It wasn't a case of them just wanting to hold on to it. They weren't clearly profitable. It happened 7 years ago. And as you can see here, it closed 2 hotels 7 years ago. They've not done anything in recent times that we're told about. So I'd actually have it down. It's quite a positive thing. They're actually going through, being really specific in what the guests are looking for and delivering it. Now, if we look at the board structure, we're given 5 executive directors, 5 non-executive directors. So that is the correct board structure in terms of a listed company, of a minimum of 50% NEDs on there. As we said, Levwell is a publicly traded organisation, with the majority of the ownership being 80% controlled by big financial institutions. So that's where you've got the likes of pension funds rather than individual members of the public on there. And the key thing on here for the board structure and SBL exams is they love to give you names in the SBL exam. But for this pre-C materials, we're not given any names. So I can kind of think that on the exam day, you might get one name for one of the different areas. It's good to see we've got 4 subcommittees on there, but we're not told who's in charge of what on there. No clear direction in terms of who covers any ESG factors. So plenty to just keep you on your toes from a board structure perspective, especially if you might get a question to apply some of the actual models on there or theories that link into strategy, both short term and long term on there. So that's really critical in what you need to be aware of. Now, let's start to take a look at the sources of income. And they've also mentioned up at the top there that Levwell has an internal audit department which reports directly to the audit committee. Plenty of accountability, but no names actually mentioned. Sounds robust, and some possible pestle legal points there in terms of compliance, the internal control procedures, lots of sort of things about remit and financial operational issues, regular inspections, and that could actually impact on Levwell's actual ability to remain as a 4-star hotel. So definitely get that down in terms of their risk management processes. Getting on to the source of income now, even more interesting on here. The keynote, in fact, it's that key, I'm even going to put my mouse on it. Only guests staying at Levwell's hotels can eat in its restaurants and use its bar. 33% of the food and drink, and in terms of the sources of income, that's crazy on there. The fact that other hotels, as we've seen in the pre-C materials, actually allow members of the public, anyone else to come in, use the hotel, use the bars. Definitely an opportunity from a SWOT analysis and a key point you have to get down. Make sure you see page 4 for other revenue streams on there about enhancing the guest experience. That is in terms of swimming pools, spas, all the rest of it on there. And lastly, don't overlook that other little slice of the pie on there. Massive SWOT opportunity in terms of weddings, business conferences that they could look to actually grow the business itself. We've seen points on seasonality, I've already mentioned before, but really it's all about who are the exceptional hotels in Estland. So similar to almost every hotel in Estland, well, who are these exceptions about who are getting away with seasonality? I presume it's some of the ones that are in the city centres who are in a prime location on there. It's relating to the average daily rate now, so make sure you have a look at page 13 in terms of the occupancy rates on an annual basis percentage. You can see on here that we've got October, November, December, January, February, March as the peak seasons. Make sure you get those months down. That is going to be critical, especially if we're given any date-sensitive information on the exam day. You've got to be able to pick up on, is that a popular time of the year or a non-popular time? I've also put in my notes, you can see it's not all bad. Remember on page 7 that a 70% occupancy rate is considered to be good. And look at that, even in the unpopular seasons, they are just floating just below 70%. So very good from Levwell's perspective. We've got the variations in terms of the occupancy rate. So check that out on page 13, how it's happened year on year. But in terms of the pricing policy, you can see at the bottom on page 9, really key point here as to at the start of each financial year, Levwell's head office sets the price per night, in other words, the roommate. And I've got down here, typically higher during the peak seasons, lower in the off-peak seasons, as you would imagine. And oddly, the hotel managers have the authority to apply a discount of 25% on there. So I'm thinking, how many people have this opportunity for the 25% off, and does anyone actually have to approve it? Shouldn't this be sort of tracked and updated in terms of the peak season, using technology to actually do it for you? And lastly, why is it only at the start of the financial year that the head office decides on the price per night? Surely this should be pivoting actually on a month-by-month basis in order to maximise revenue on there. We're also given a breakdown in terms of key activities and processes within the hotel industry, and for Levwell in particular. We're given reservations and bookings as the first place. Really make sure you link it into stakeholders here. No bookings from anyone to walk in at reception, which seems a bit weird. In other words, can you not just turn up to a hotel and say, please could I book into a room? It doesn't seem like you can do that. It's only in advance. Understand the operational processes, what you think could possibly go wrong. So when we're looking at it here, prospective guests, availability, price, dates, guest requirements, making a booking. You've got the aspects of the likes of booking.com and individual approaches on there for the hotels. Could be a factor in how people reserve and book the hotels itself, and linking it to more efficient than having individual websites to track everything on. They have a single company website, but there is a risk of error with manual bookings if someone was to call up. So remember to yourself, it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows on the exam day, but a case of really thinking about it as a case of, well, what could possibly go wrong and what other things do I need to refer to? So now we're looking at the other processes here about checking in and checking out, housekeeping, maintenance and catering. So important elements that you just got to get your head around. I think some students might overlook it a bit too much, that it's odd that guests pay at the checkout. So if you book a normal hotel, you book it online, you put in your card details and you make the payment on there. Whereas you actually pay for the accommodation plus any other purchases when you actually check out. So from a cash flow perspective, could be a bit tricky if someone doesn't actually pay there, and other operational factors in terms of the housekeeping. Remember, these people are really critical to guests having a really good time, keeping it tidy, the restaurants, reception areas. Key points to note here in terms of the third party, we're not given any other details in the pre-C materials. So laundry services on there for the towels, the linen, outsourced to a third party. We're not told who they are, but note it down in terms of another stakeholder. We're then told about the maintenance and catering. And like I said, I think lots of SBL students will just go, I know there's maintenance, I know there's catering in a hotel, but it's the specific nature to Levwell that you need to be aware of. The important role of keeping up that 4-star rating. A lot of areas to cover and things that could go wrong in terms of the furniture, flooring, plumbing on there, systems, lighting. Think about who is accountable for which area, especially if it comes up on the exam day. And lastly, in terms of catering, they provide the food and the drinks, which, remember, links to 33% of Levwell's income that you've seen on page 9. Levwell has a standard actual operating procedures on there, so remember that key term in terms of it sounds like a pretty good system. It identifies the tasks, undertakes the room. You have the housekeeping managers that check a sample on there, and they've got procedures to follow about how the rooms are prepared so that when a guest turns up, they go, yes, this looks really nice for me to actually stay here. And that's why I have to have it down on my notes that something will go wrong on your exam day in this scenario, and it could be this, because it just sounds too good to be true, that too many things within the hotel industry just seem too good on there for it. So greeting guests with a smile, responding positively, customer service training. Key to a successful hotel, as we know as before, is the guest experience, and that is where it starts with the reception staff and those standard operating procedures, so make sure you get that down. We're getting into a lot of other areas now, so different stakeholders, areas of the hotel who are accountable, such as the hotel managers. But it's worth at this point remembering that Levwell Plc has only 35 hotels, so be clear if you're assuming that we have one hotel manager per hotel. It does sound all right on there, but just in case you're going to make a specific point on it. Then we get on to the individual stakeholder groups. Now, employees, suppliers, and procurement on there, information systems. But if we start with the employees, they are so critical for you to be really specific about, especially as we know on page 13, the staff turnover is at 39% for 2005. And you kind of got to ask yourself, well, they shout about looking after their employees so much. Why do they want to leave on there? And we're also told about operational staff working part-time. Is there a reason why they're not actually put on a full-time contract? It's a tricky one in terms of the analysis, but a good initiative, but not told if it runs fairly in terms of the employee recognition program. So there are some pros, there are some cons, but it's a bit weird how staff can be nominated for a reward by their manager or by a colleague. Sounds fantastic, but then why is the employee turnover around 40% for the last 5 years? The incentive clearly isn't working on there, so definitely worth noting down. Coming on to the suppliers now and the procurement. So what the leisure actual guests expect from a 4-star hotel. Not told who this is in terms of the restaurant manager who negotiates those contracts, but it sounds like they've got good processes in place with the procurement team. Think, what do the guests want really in terms of they're coming to a hotel, it's not in a busy city on there, and then we're talking about the assessment of environmental credentials, potential suppliers, lots of different things as to they have routine maintenance, but then from your SBL hat on, are they actually having capital expenditure there, revenue expenditure? And they've got on here that Levwell aims to refurbish each of its hotels approximately every 10 years. Now, is it going to be a bit outdated? What do the actual guests think to that? Is it too long? Definitely something for you to note down in terms of a key point there, that 10-year basis for the refurbishment to meet up with the consumer demands. Now, next we come on to the information systems. As you would imagine, key pestle technology points on here. Also, IT manager is mentioned out of nowhere, so remember that this role exists in the company and to refer back to. Another key term in terms of the hotel management system. So again, on the exam day, if you get HMS, I think it might actually throw a few students off, to be honest with you. Levwell uses this system, but not told how well it actually implements it. So again, from an operational point of view, are there issues there? Could technology fall into it? Looking into how we could apply these different areas of reservations, availability, how the guests stay at the hotel, reservations on there, lots of different things. And I always think worst case scenario with the SBL exam, what if the guest data got leaked? What if there was a risk on there that the system failed, impacting on the guest experience on there? And Levwell uses this system, not told how well though, so does it have some risks associated with it if the system fails from a technology point and a pestle analysis? If the app fails, do the rooms and the processes, are they going to work correctly? I think it does have a lot of things you can talk about, so make sure you're on top of those information areas and systems. Now, coming up to the other areas such as risks, and we've got a final point on the IT systems at the top, that they're hosted on an in-house server, so based in the head office. Levwell does not use cloud computer-based services, either to host its IT systems or store its data. The alarms bell should be ringing about data breaches on there. Are they actually backed up? And then that nicely leads us on to the different risks of competition, pricing, reputation, people, technology, and data security. The key model on here is definitely the TARA model. So thinking about those different risks, if it was to be tested, you could apply the TARA model as to, should we transfer the risk? Should we avoid the risk? Should we reduce the risk? Or simply accept the risk? And you can see on my notes as you're going through, no board member names are actually provided in terms of the risk and the audit committees when it links into those disclosures and assessments of those key risks. Systems, internal controls, risk management, so many things that they've talked about in terms of mitigating the risk, but we're not told who's in charge of it. So again, make sure you get that down in your notes. Levwell's principal risk, you can see there from the competition, as you would imagine, the hotels and the home sharing on page 5 for competition. Pricing, we've touched on page 9 at the start of the financial year in the different areas, remembering as well that those leisure guests are more price sensitive. Reputation, the staff are key to that good reputation, so it's really not very good to see the staff turnover being at such a high rate. Also, we have on there technology and data-wise, so the biggest risk to them all are from the preceding notes are if the people, the staff, and that's a social point from a pestle analysis, don't help the quality of service and the guest expectations. Technology, they've highlighted on security and performance here, so what if the website went down or got hacked? Another potential pestle area. And lastly, the data security on there. So Esalen has strict data protection laws, risks of fines, reputational damages. Another pestle point there from a legality point of view, or legal on there, with failure to comply. Lots of key things that you could be referring to. Now we're coming on to Levwell's mission and their values. Really interesting word on here. So very little included about ethics in terms of the whole place throughout. So make sure you've get that down in your list to make sure that you know all of the codes of ethics. They're up on page 1 under the actual contents page. But for the mission, to provide an exceptional experience for every guest every time they visit. And you go to, I looked at it and went, there's bound to be something goes wrong on this pre-scene on the exam day, which is going to break the mission that Levwell actually has in place. So again, get that down, refer back to that mission and quote it directly. In terms of the values, again, really interesting about that we have employee turnover stats being so bad, but then they say we take care of our staff and take care of our guests on there. On page 6, the most important line underlying factor, which contributes to the hotel success is the guest experience, and that's where they say they actually provide a first-class guest experience. We're also given points about positivity, responsibility, teamwork. So lots of pestle social factors in there. But then why do lots of staff end up leaving if apparently they look after the staff, good community, good environment? Something just doesn't feel right, and you've just got to refer back to that it breaks some of the values in particular and links into page 13 about good guest satisfaction. You can also see on page 12 on there, I've put on a few of the models, so Porter's value chain, the Boston Consulting Matrix on there, or Boston Consulting Group Matrix, shall I say, along with the Poppet model. Definitely check those out. Some are more popular or likely to maybe come up, but do not overlook some of them. They could come up on your examination. Now the last page on number 13, I've got Mendelow's matrix up at the top there about the different stakeholder groups we've talked about in the recording, thinking about the level of power each stakeholder group has versus the level of interest. So identifying what I would say after this recording is to go away and think about who are the key players, which stakeholders should you keep satisfied, which should you keep with minimal effort, and which should you keep informed. In terms of the financial information and the KPIs, make sure a key note to get down here is the year end of the 30th of June. Who knows, you might get something about after the year end. It might be a cut-off issue. Just to be aware of it, it would be a very silly mistake to make. And then going through each of the financial information one by one, very positive SWOT analysis strength there, that the revenue is increasing year on year. We've touched on the operating profit margin, that in terms of the industry average, it floats around about 10%. And you can see on here that it's actually slightly increasing from 13.2 to 14.1%. It could be argued, however, that with the revenue increasing at the rates that it does, should their operating margin be actually higher? It's a tricky one, because with the rate in the industry being so much lower, I'd be tending to go on the it's quite good, they're a bit higher than the industry, to be honest with you. Then we come on to the occupancy and the RevPAR. So occupancy rate, again, try not to get it mixed up like we talked about on page 7, and it's going to get impacted by the pricing strategy on page 9, that you read 77% and you go, 23% of the rooms are actually unoccupied. But if you look at it from an industry perspective and standard, they float around about 70%. So occupancy rise, they're actually doing really well. RevPAR, the higher the better in terms of the effectiveness, how they are actually gaining revenue based on the amount that they have available on there. So another SWOT analysis strength. And then the last two in terms of guest satisfaction, really pleasing to see it to remain consistent over the years. It's an important KPI on page number 7. The only disappointing one is that employee turnover, not good in terms of aligning to their values on page 12. And as you can see on page 5, staff in the industry is a challenge, and they are key to the hotel success on page 6 to give the best client experience. So again, room for improvement on there, and a SWOT analysis weak point. Some final areas at the bottom about maybe some predictions. I've got down strategic options and growth. So Levwell may be tested on choosing the best growth strategy or expansion. So maybe looking at those areas of maybe being a franchise or expanding what they currently have. Governance and risks. So the exam may assess how Levwell manages its key risks and its effectiveness in governance, and also applying the ACCA Code of Ethics. I think that definitely has a lot you could talk about. And lastly, digital technology. Levwell could be examined on improving its technology, data security, and digital systems. There are so many points on technology. Must get that down, and it could also link into a pestle analysis. And that brings us to page 13, the end of my notes. And I just want to say, of course, a huge best of luck for your upcoming exam. As you can see, the notes are very, very comprehensive. I've not had time to go through all of the actual theories, so if you've downloaded the notes, you can read through those in your own time. It's definitely going to help you out to give you the best chance to get the 50 plus. So if you would like a copy, click the link in the description of this video and you can get a copy there. Also, check out the Astranity mock papers and also their pre-scene analysis packs with everything you need to get the 50 plus. And a massive thank you and best of luck ahead of your exam. So be sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to share this video with anyone else you know who's doing the SBL exam. As you can probably tell from my voice, it's going to help them to pass on there. Well, we can't edit the video now, that's it, we're at the end. Anywho, I'll see you on the other side. Leave me any comments how you're getting on, and thank you very much.